What's up, Leafs Land? How's it going, everybody? Happy Friday. Um, what a crazy week. This week has absolutely flown by, and there's a lot going on in the NHL. There's some, I'm just looking at my Twitter feed right here, and right now the Gary Bettman is talking, and there's some good news coming out of what Gary Bettman is saying today. It seems like, based on what Gary Bettman is saying, that the NHL is tracking towards hockey-related revenue, surpassing or getting to 5 billion or surpassing 5 billion, which would put them at a higher mark than they were in 2019, 2020. Now, this is great news. The NHL is healthy, which is great. The NHL is profitable, which is great. Um, it's a good sign that the cap may go up sooner rather than later, but at the end of the day, the players are in debt to the owners and they are in debt a lot of money. So if I were the players, come this off season, I would use that inflator, that 5% inflator that they have, and start getting the cap going, because this flat cap is really hurting business, is hurting NHL contracts, and players are not making as much money as they're supposed to. And we saw in this off season where a guy like Freddie Anderson, who's putting up, Andre Vasilevsky type numbers. I think, yeah, I think Freddie at the current moment is tied with Vasilevsky in save percentage and stuff like that. So there's a lot of good goalies out there. There's a lot of players, good players out there, and they're taking lesser contracts. So, um, you know, Anderson takes 4.5 million, which is less than what everybody else is getting in terms of Jacob Markstrom and UC Saros and all these other goalies that are signing contracts. And Peter Mrazek got 3.8 in Toronto. You're seeing players sign lesser contracts. Taylor Hall signed a lesser contract. And based on what I'm seeing right now, Gary Bettman is saying good things about the revenue. And next year's NHL cap ceiling is projected to be 82.5 million, which is, it's going to go up by 1 million. Basically, this this $1 million increment that they're doing every single year is basically Jason Spezza. The NHL is telling the Leafs, we'll give you Jason Spezza for free every year, just because we're gonna increase the caps at $1 million a year, and so you guys keep signing Jason Spezza, and you don't have to actually work him into the cap numbers. So yeah, based on what the NHL is saying, Gary Bettman says that the cap is going to go up by 1 million. I believe it's going to go up by 1 million again the following season. And then we're going to see a significant raise after that. So I think we're going to be at 83.5 million at the conclusion of next season, not this season, not the 21-22 season, but the 22-23 season. And that 83.5 could go up as much as 85, 86, 87 million dollars. So it's it's definitely a positive sign for the NHL. And right now, Frank Saravalli is reporting that HRR projection for hockey related revenue is 5.2 billion. Billion. So the NHL is doing good. They came out of COVID and shutting down buildings pretty strong. And the Board of Governors meeting is going on in Florida right now, which I think they're also going to be approving a sale of the Pittsburgh Penguins to the Fenway Sports Group, which is located in Boston. And that sports group owns a lot of big franchises in terms of sports and soccer and different things. And it seems like that's what's happening is there's a new trend in sports ownership where big conglomerates are merging, and Fenway Sports Group actually earlier this season, you guys can Google it. Fenway came to MLSC and wanted to do a merger with MLSC and sort of start to produce this sort of like a big company where they could start buying sports franchises. So, if Fenway and MLSC were to merge, um, you would see, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Um, I think they own Liverpool, and you're looking at is it Arsenal or Liverpool that Fenway owns? Let's look this up. Fenway Sports Group. So they own the Boston Red Sox, which is obvious, Fenway. They own Fenway Park, the Boston Red Sox, Liverpool FC. They own Anfield. The Worcester Red Sox, the Salem Red Sox, and they own 80% of the New England Sports Network and MGM Music Hall at Fenway. So they wanted to merge with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they wanted to become this big conglomerate and this is like a new trend that I'm seeing in sports, and these big companies are buying up different sports. Now, I don't, management groups would be different and things would be kind of siloed, and the NHL would have to work that out. But, one big company owning multiple teams, like, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Marlies, the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins, and the Pittsburgh Penguins. Let's just say if the sale went through and the merge happened, you'd have different management teams, you have different GMs, coaches, everything like that. There would be no real um issues with how the teams are being built and competitiveness and things like that. um Even though the sale is going through for the Pittsburgh Penguins, Mario Lemieux is still going to stay on with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and he's going to continue working with that group. So it's very interesting right now what's going on in sports, and this whole idea of one person owning a team and it not being some sort of like big conglomerate or some super rich company owning sports teams and making it a brand, as opposed to just one guy saying that this is my team. And it's going away from the football model, the NFL model, where it's one rich guy. And but you're seeing values go up right now. I think Forbes just reported the New York Rangers are worth $2 billion and the Leafs are worth 1.8 billion, and the Montreal Canadiens are worth 1.6 billion. So sports franchise values are going up, and it's an interesting thing to kind of pay attention to on the side. Moving on to the Toronto Maple Leafs. The Leafs have been doing a lot of travel lately, and since I did my last podcast, the Leafs faced the Minnesota Wild, and that was a great game. That's the kind of game I love watching. It's I was never I'm not nervous anymore watching the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's not something that bothers me. I don't get nervous for Leaf games anymore. I know they're a good team. I don't really care what the score is. They can go down early, they can be down late. None of that stuff really bothers me. So, there's two good teams going at it. And the Leafs went down early 3-0. Jason Spezza, being the ageless wonder that he is, had a great game. Looked dynamic on that first power play. And it's interesting watching that game. Mitch Marner's injured right now, and you watch that first power play, and with the shooters that are on it, and the way they move the puck in that Minnesota game, and then you know the Leafs scored 2 goals last night against the Tampa Bay Lightning, two on the power play, and um, even though Spezza wasn't playing last night, I watched the way they moved the puck, and to me, just just looking at the recent games, recency bias being what it is. Mitch missed a bunch of games. I can't talk this morning. So Mitch Marner's missed a bunch of games, and then we saw Jason Spezza take his place on the power play in the Minnesota game. They moved the puck. Jason Spezza has a shot, and when you think about what they tried to do at the beginning of the year, where they wanted the Toronto Maple Leafs power play to be a lot like the Tampa Bay power play, where Point is in the middle. The Bruins do the same thing with Patrice Bergeron in the middle. And the puck moves around, and sometimes it moves in the middle, and you get a quick shot off. Whether Point scores those goals, whether it's Patrice Bergeron that scores those goals, Mitch Marner was 0% effective when the Leafs tried to do something like that. And the power play guy for the Leafs right now just came from was running Carolina last year, and you see the way Carolina is built. They got Sebastian Aho, Svechnikov. They got a bunch of players that can score from in and around the net, and even in that bumper spot. And Mitch Marner, unfortunately, is not the type of player that has a shot that can beat goalies very often. So it wasn't a very effective. And then you saw Jason Spezza in that spot, and Matthews taps it to him, and he it puts it between the legs of the goalie Cam Talbot, and it seems to work. And last night against Tampa, the Leafs scored 2 power play goals, and there comes a point where you have to start thinking to yourself, would it be better if the Leafs moved Mitch Marner onto the second power play, created some playmaking for guys who are lesser in terms of moving the puck and don't have amazing shots, but maybe a nice pass here and there, a seam pass here and there, something that goes tape to tape, and kind of beats the goalie when he's trying to transition from side to side, might give an edge to like a Michael Bunting or Wayne Simmons or Kasha or Kerfoot, Mikheyev when he comes back, and maybe those guys can start beating goalies because they get crisp passes and the shot comes off a little bit faster based on that, that's that crisp passing, that playmaking that Marner can produce. And you know you really have to think about it because Matthews has just came off a 7-game goal streak, and Jonathan Tavares is still scoring. Jonathan, that was a brain fart of a lifetime. John Tavares and William Nylander are showing great chemistry, and they're scoring a lot right now too. So there has to be something you can do to kind of spread out. I know that third line with ideally it would be Richie, Kampf, and Kasha all the time, but sometimes you got to move people around, and I could see Mikheyev joining that group of Kampf and Kasha on the third line because Mikheyev can move, and he's very defensively responsible, and he kills penalties, and he definitely can score. So it's that third line I don't want to touch so much. So it just becomes weird when you have Mitch Marner. I know you can put him with Austin Matthews or Tavares all day long, but not that I'm suggesting that you put him on the fourth line or anything like that, but there has to be a smart way to move Mitch Marner around to produce more scoring, more secondary scoring, instead of just helping Matthews score 55 instead of 45. You know what I'm saying? I don't think it really matters if he scores 45 or 55, to be honest with you. Um, it's not a conversation of is he a great goal scorer. If you're not of the opinion that he's one of the best goal scorers in the NHL, then there's really nothing anybody can do for you. And it's not one of those things where the Leaf fans need it, as ammunition in conversations. Um, Matthews probably will never be a 100 goal guy. I mean, 100 point guy in his career, just because he doesn't play with any prolific goal scorers. If you put a 30 or 40 goal guy on his wing, maybe he gets to 100 points. But Matthews and Marner are not going to win um, any awards for the most points. Matthews will easily win um, some. He's already got a Maurice Rocket Richard. He's going to win more in his career. But it becomes an interesting topic. Matthews can score, and he's got Bunting to help him out. And I think if you put Ilya Mikheyev there, um, it's possible Nick Robertson can be there one day. Rodion Amarov maybe next year. It becomes a conversation of what's better for the team overall. When you go into the playoffs, do you want Marner, who's not the biggest guy, who's not the toughest guy, who's not the grittiest guy, going up against the other team's biggest and best defenseman, or do you want him, or do you want to spread out the offense? I think there has to come a time where Mitch Marner, because he doesn't score a ton of goals, and he is more of a straight up playmaker, you know, we all thought one day that Mitch Marner was going to be the next Patrick Kane, and Patrick Kane is a 100 point guy and he's prolific in goal scoring. But Mitch Marner has proven that he's more of just a point producer and not so much of a goal scorer. So that could change. He could develop his shot. He could become a much better goal scorer. There's a lot of things he can do, but at this point, you got to use him to create more offense on different lines. Right now, when the Leafs get their third and fourth lines rolling, when Jason Spezza is on the ice and Wayne Simmons is crashing down low, they produce a decent amount of offense. And, you don't go 16-4-1 in 21 games without production all around. And right now it's, you saw it a little bit last night in the Tampa game. And Kasha scored a couple of goals, but he was on the power play, and it wasn't Mitch Marner there in that spot. So at the end of the day, whether it's Spezza, Kasha, somebody else, Ilya Mikheyev, there's definitely an argument to be made for moving Mitch Marner around and spreading around that offense. And it's it makes sense. So um just to wrap up that Minnesota game, that was one great game. At the end, they went to overtime, chances like crazy in overtime. I'm surprised nothing went in. And then, you had the shootout, which is a coin flip, really. And Austin Matthews made that great move. Forehand, backhand, top corner. He does that so easily. It's unbelievable, crazy how easy he goes forehand, backhand, and he puts it in the top. But that Minnesota game was one of the best games I watched all season. And the following night, the Leafs played the Jets, and that was a debacle. Or like that game divulged into like craziness. Um, and then we had the Thursday night game against Tampa. So one thing I want to show you guys is something from last night, and it's actually a really nice segue into an article I was reading on the Athletic. So let's go through this first. This is from last night's game, and I noticed it while I was watching it, and then somebody cut the clip and put it on Twitter. So I wanted to show you guys. Watch Austin Matthews.
Party finds Joseph. Matthew Joseph streaks ahead. Lines it across the line. Simmons defending.
This was a Leafs penalty.
So that was Steve Dangle. Look at Austin Matthews being mauled at center ice. Unbelievably disrespectful to the player, to the team. Why? So what is the point of an NHL team spending $100 million in building an NHL team to contend for some trophy, some accolade, whatever it is? Hey, build a team and go be competitive. Okay. And then the refs take all that hard work and throw it out the window because they don't police the game properly. Look what Austin Matthews is going through at center ice. And directly and immediately after this, the Tampa Bay Lightning scored on the power play. Why does Austin Matthews have to go through stuff like this? And all we hear is Connor McDavid in Edmonton. That's all we hear. Connor McDavid, Connor McDavid doesn't get enough penalties. Austin Matthews hasn't drawn a single penalty this season. And this is the stuff I'm watching on television. And you want to tell me you got the best refs in the world?
This was a Leafs penalty.
So here's the article. Why doesn't Austin Matthews draw more penalties? This is on The Athletic. It's a brief investigation. They go through it. So we all hear a lot about Michael Bunting, and he's drawn 10 5-on-5 penalties, but 17 penalties overall he's drawn. And I love Michael Bunting, but there's a trend here, and I'm going to show it to you. Five-on-five penalties drawn leaders over the last 3 seasons. 3 seasons. Brady Tkachuk, Brad Marchand, Connor McDavid, obviously, Mark Scheifele, Brendan Lemieux, Matthew Tkachuk. So look, Matthew Tkachuk, Brendan Lemieux, Brad Marchand, Brady Tkachuk, Michael Bunting, very popular in terms of drawing penalties, Nazem Kadri. What do all these players have in common? Tkachuk, the Tkachuks, Brad Marchand, Kadri, Bunting, and Lemieux. What do all these players have in common? They're all greasy players. They're greasy. The superstars, like you see Nathan MacKinnon there, and you see Connor McDavid there. Nathan MacKinnon and Connor McDavid, it was 70 and 63 over the last 3 years. Matthews is at 30 over the last 3 years. Why? Because he skates through the nonsense. He doesn't turn around to the refs. He's not making pouty faces like McDavid, and he's not complaining. So if the NHL has a problem, and they've created it themselves, this is why rats exist. The Tkachuks, Marchand, Kadri, Bunting. This is why you need to go spend money on some guy who does crazy things because he's going to draw penalties. Brendan Lemieux. Look at this. Matthews has drawn 30 5-on-5 penalties during these 3 seasons, which placed him just outside the top 100. Matthews is outside of the top 100 in drawn penalties. Nylander and Marner have 26 apiece, which is 1 less than Kerfoot and Wayne Simmons. Why are Marner and Nylander, who have the puck so much, who drive puck possession, who create puck possession, are top five in the NHL in takeaways and creating and thus creating the puck possession? Why these guys have the same amount of drawn penalties as Alex Kerfoot and Wayne Simmons? The Leafs in general, and it says right here, Tavares topped out the group with 41, and he's tied for 39th in the league. Leafs couldn't get a penalty call if their life depended on it. Other teams are getting penalty calls like this. Edmonton Oilers, 5 power plays a game. And that's why you create the problem that you have in the NHL. You need guys to be stupid on the ice, and that's what draws penalties. When you play through it, when Matthews goes inside, outside, and goes through 3 guys, every single one of them is coming down on the stick in the hands. You're not calling it. He's getting mauled at center ice. Pierre-Luc Dubois did it in Winnipeg. Didn't get a penalty. You saw, I just showed you point blank what happened to him at center ice. Skating back into his own zone. No penalty. This isn't complaining. This is a problem with officiating. I'm not saying the Leafs should get more calls. This is an issue throughout the NHL, and superstars go through it. Guys who have the puck on their stick 60%, 50% of the game, who are creating puck possession, who are driving puck possession. It shouldn't be the Rats that are top 10 in the NHL in penalties drawn. It should be the superstars. McDavid has the puck more than everybody else. Nathan McKinnon has the puck. I understand why those guys are in the top 10 and as high as they are. They should be drawing more calls. McDavid gets hacked / tripped all the time. Same thing with Nathan McKinnon. The guy's so fast, the only way to slow him down or stop him is to trip him, hook him, or slash him. So I understand why those names are there. But why doesn't Austin Matthews get any respect? Because he doesn't complain. You know, his coach has to say something. His coach has to say, hey, has anybody else noticed, other than me who looks at the stats every single day, that Austin Matthews hasn't drawn a single penalty this season? That's gross. That is gross. You want to consider yourself a major sport? I'm one of the 4 major sports in North America. It's Bush League. Their referees are blind. They suck. There's 4 of them on the ice, and none of them see a damn thing. But every ticky-tacky piece of shit penalty gets called. There's the guy, skating towards the corner in the defensive zone. You go like this, and the guy falls over, cross-checking. So that little tap and the guy goes down is a penalty. But what happened to Austin Matthews right there wasn't a penalty. Don't tell me you didn't see it. There's 4 of you on the ice. It's gross what's going on in the NHL. Gross. So the Leafs made a trade this week. Very minor deal. The Leafs have followed through on their commitment to their players. They brought over Lettinen from Europe, the KHL, and they said, if it doesn't work out, we'll move you on to a team where you can get an opportunity. They moved them to Columbus. Semyonov this season played with the Marlies. He played some games with the Leafs. He said, I want to go back to the KHL, so the Leafs released him. They've been pretty good. I think that's why KHL players most often than not sign with the Leafs compared to other teams, because, the Leafs always offer you the opportunity, and if it doesn't work out, they work hard enough to move you to another opportunity, so you're not just stuck behind a bunch of guys on the depth chart. And the Toronto Maple Leafs depth chart is very deep, and Curtis Gabriel wasn't going to make the Toronto Maple Leafs, unfortunately, with the way Simmons and Clifford are playing, so they moved him to Chicago. Most probably he is going to get an opportunity there, and The Leafs get Chad, I believe his name is Kryes, for the Chicago Blackhawks. He's a second round pick. He's if he turns out to be a decent defenseman for the Marlies and maybe the Maple Leafs one day, that would be a pretty good deal for the Leafs, considering Curtis Gabriel was never gonna really do anything than just be a tough guy, maybe a fighter for the Leafs. The Leafs have recently called up a couple of defensemen, Biega and Rubens, from the Marlies, so they're a little depleted, so this helps them as well. And this guy's 23 years old, so he's got a lot of hockey ahead of him. We'll see how he does with the Marlies. Let's see if there's any more news coming out. Let's see if there's any more news coming out of what Gary Bettman is saying. Oh, after practice today, Peter Mrazek said that he feels good. He has labeled himself as day-to-day officially, so that's good. The Leafs do have a back-to-back coming up soon. Spezza's working with the goalies, which is nice. Poor Spezza, and I can't believe they gave him 6 games for his first suspension. This goes back to the NHL being a garbage league in just the way it's officiated and the way it's run. So you see players like Brad Marchand get suspended for slew footing, and they have a history. They've done it before. He does it again. He slew foots a player on the Vancouver Canucks team, and he gets 3 games for something so dangerous that he's done before. If the guy repeatedly slew foots people and can cause serious injury, why aren't you suspending him more than 3 games? Because it's Brad Marchand. And guess what? Jason Spezza has played over 1,800 games, never been suspended in his life. Guess what? First time he puts his knee into someone's chest, 6 games. They're appealing it, but by the time the appeal goes through and everything, he's gonna have already served 3 or 4 games, so it's a real waste of time. Just so inconsistent and garbage. Just so inconsistent and bush league, like they're so all over the place. It's simple. You slew foot a guy and you get 2 games, and you slew foot a guy, minimum is double the last penalty. You don't just go from 2 games to 3 games. You go from 2 to 4. 4 is the minimum when you do it the second time. And if you're Brad Marchand and your rap sheet is longer than that, if 4, 5, 6, there comes a time where the consequences have to be substantial. But Jason Spezza gets 6 games because they deemed it was predatory? Slew footing is not predatory? You're telling me Brad Marchand is slew footing people by accident? The problem with the NHL is they talk to their fans like they're morons. NHL fans are very smart, very educated. They get the nuances. They know the referees are calling penalties based on their opinions inside their head. They're not calling it. When you look at that list, the top 10 of the last 3 years in terms of penalties drawn, and you see all the rats on that list, it's very clear that the NHL is not calling penalties based on the rule book. They're calling penalties based on people they know are getting into the thick of it on the ice. Brad Marchand, after whistles, gets into it. Lemieux and the Kachucks and all these different players, they get into it on the ice. Michael Bunting gets into it on the ice. They're chirping, they're pushing, they're face washing, they're doing all these things. And so because the referees see it, they pay attention and say, hey, someone's going to go after Michael Bunting. And as soon as he gets tripped on the ice, they call tripping. But because Austin Matthews and a lot of other players, not just Austin Matthews, I'm just using Austin Matthews as the example because it's so blatantly in front of me all the time because I'm constantly watching Leaf games and that's the stuff I see. I see him getting mauled by Pierre-Luc Dubois. I see him going through the center ice and just being held and hooked and just grabbing jerseys. Like, that's a penalty. And because you're not paying attention to it because he's 6'4", 220 pounds, and he just skates through it like it's nothing, you're clearly not calling the rule book. You're calling the players. You're looking for certain things based on the name on the back of the jersey. This is not about the rule book. It's never been about the rule book. It's all about the refs and their interpretation of what's going on the ice. If Matthews doesn't do dirty things and doesn't get into scrums and starts punching guys in the face when the referee comes in and grabs people and he just starts throwing glove punches in people's face and pissing them off and doesn't make the referees pay attention to him, they won't see the hacking and the slashing and the holding and the way the guy's holding him at center ice. And that's the way the NHL referees call penalties. It's not based on the rule book. It has nothing. It's never been about the rule book. It's always the same players that are on the list in terms of drawing penalties. The Kadris, the Kachucks, Brendan Lemieux, Brad Marchand. These guys are always going to lead the league in penalties because they're always in the thick of it, and the referees are paying attention to them. If you don't get the referee's eyes on you, you're never going to get a penalty called. It's sad that Edmonton has to make such a big stink about McDavid not getting penalties. He has the puck most of the time. If the referees aren't paying attention to the guy with the puck, what are they paying attention to? What are they doing on the ice? There's 4 of them. I know 2 are linesmen, but still, you have to be watching the guy with the puck to see if he's getting hooked, slashed, pushed, cross-checked. And he's just skating through the zone and, he's dingle-dangling, and then all of a sudden he gets tripped and nobody saw it. If you're not watching McDavid with the puck, what are you watching? It's Bush League. I don't know how the NHL is making money by accident. If it wasn't for these hockey fans are so amazing. Hockey fans are the best. They create the rivalries and they watch the games and they make chirping fun, and I have so much fun chirping online with Montreal Canadiens fans and Sens fans and Winnipeg Jets fans. And that's what hockey's about. Hockey, that back and forth between different fan bases is what makes hockey so much fun. It's the chirping is on a whole different level compared to baseball or basketball or the NFL. Hockey chirping is just way different, but if it wasn't for these fans supporting the game that they love so religiously, they're carrying this sport, and it has nothing to do with Gary Bettman or Bill Daly or any of these guys or the board of governors. These guys have no idea what's going on. They don't know. And if the NFL didn't protect their quarterbacks the way they do and create certain rules, they wouldn't be this high producing. They wouldn't make the games fun. I mean, their TV contracts are ridiculous. They put 50 to 70,000 people in the stands because quarterbacks like Tom Brady become legendary. If you don't protect your superstars, like the NBA does with LeBron James or all these other guys, the NHL thinks, oh, parity only exists because the referees don't call it the way it should be called. If the referees called penalties based on actual penalties, guys like McDavid, McKinnon, Matthews, Ovi, Pasternak, these guys would destroy the NHL. The Ottawa Senators, they still suck. The Montreal Canadiens are still garbage. They're at the bottom of the standings for a reason, but they would be even more buried. Like the the 5 wins or the 4 wins that the Arizona Coyotes have this season wouldn't exist if it wasn't for referees. When they win 1-0 against the Winnipeg Jets, yeah, obviously the Winnipeg Jets didn't play their best game that night. But if the refs call it, instead of creating this idea of parity, and all parity does is create this middle platform of teams that just suck, but they don't suck as much as everybody else. You want some examples? The Philadelphia Flyers. The Columbus Blue Jackets don't suck as much as the Sens or the Canadiens or the Coyotes, but the Columbus Blue Jackets have picked in the lottery 8 out of the last 10 years or something like that. And they're going to continue to be in the middle. I mean, they're going to continue to be in the middle of the NHL because of parity. Because they get wins based on, the referees like, okay, we're not going to call this one. Tampa's got 4 power plays in a row. We can't call another penalty for them. That's how the NHL works. Oh, this team just got a couple of power plays in a row. Let's get the other shitty team who didn't show up, who won't spend the money, who doesn't have the good players, who doesn't have a good goaltender, who has no defense. Let's give them a makeup call. Let's even it up a little bit. That's what the NHL does. That's their idea of parity. That's where parity came in. The salary cap didn't create parity. That was just a diversion. Hey, we're going to put a cap on spending so that we can help out the little guys. That was just a diversion for you to look this way while the NHL referees did something over here. And that's called create parity. And we've seen it as NHL fans. We've caught these guys in 4K. We've caught the referees in 4K many times, making penalties up to even out games that didn't warrant evening out. It's a shame. It's a shame that good players don't get the benefit of the doubt just to get the rule book called. Because all you're doing is watering down the product so that shit teams like the Philadelphia Flyers can have, something to be proud of. What do the Philadelphia Flyers have to be proud of over the last 10 years? Just spending hundreds of millions of dollars on goaltending to just be trash. Let's help out the Philadelphia Flyers. Let's get them some power plays, and I'm sure Claude Giroux can find a way to put some in the net, if not make some plays for other guys to score, and then, all of a sudden a fan base thinks Jakub Voracek is like somebody worth talking about. No, he's not. That's the NHL creating something out of nothing. And, it's crazy. So, the NHL went into this season, the 2021-22 season, projecting an hockey-related revenue limit of $4.8 billion, and now they're seeing that 4.8 is going up to 5.2. And this is what I'm talking about. It's all because of you, the fans, buying the jerseys, buying the memorabilia, going to the games, selling out the games. This is for the fans. The fans are doing this. Bill Daly and Gary Bettman are doing fuck all. They suck at running a league, and the referees are garbage. But way to go, fans. You guys are going to keep the NHL going, and it's going to get stronger, better than ever. And Gary Bettman won't be around forever. So all we can do is cross our fingers and keep booing the guy every time he hands out the Stanley Cup till we can get somewhere, because this is not conducive to a good NHL. This is not how you create a product where the TV contracts get ridiculous and we start seeing real entertaining product on the ice. The it's not it wouldn't be the worst thing if the penalties started getting called more and there was a lot more power plays and scoring went up in the NHL. You want to complain about scoring in the NHL? Gary Bettman, goals are down. Instead of decreasing equipment size, instead of putting players in danger, how about you call the simple penalties? You dumbass. We don't need to shrink the goalie's pads. We don't need to make the nets bigger and rounded or whatever the hell that you're working on. How about you call when Austin Matthews gets mauled like that, or when Connor McDavid gets pushed into the post from behind? These dangerous plays. That's how you create more goals, is you call penalties when there's a penalty on the ice, so that the other team can get penalized by having power play goals scored on them and them losing games. That's how you penalize. Not okay, well, let's shrink goalies' equipment to get more goals in the NHL. How about you just call the penalties based on the rule book that you created? Unbelievable. But in general, I've been very happy with how the Leafs have played this season. Their defense is getting shaky. I don't know what's happening to Justin Hall. This guy had such an amazing season last year. The Leafs defense started looking really good once Muzzin and Hall they were cruising last year. That magic, I don't know what happened to the magic, but that magic needs to come back, as the Leafs right now, they're doing this thing called pinching all the time. And they're pitching in some horrible spots, and they're giving a lot of, they're creating a lot of odd man rushes for the opposition, and that's not conducive to winning, boys. 16-4-1. I love what you guys have been doing. November was amazing. December started out pretty good. The Leafs are, a competitive team every night, whether you're playing a powerhouse like Minnesota. That's a weird sentence to say, but Minnesota is a powerhouse. And the Leafs have already beat the Boston Bruins this season. They've already beat Tampa this season. And their defense is very important. And right now, Justin Hall is having some issues, and it's a hard thing to figure out. I want to give the guy the benefit of the doubt. I like Justin Hall as a person. I like him as a defenseman. But he just seems like a little slow, a little bit behind the play. He's not reading things right, and the puck is just flying past him, and it's ending up in the net a lot. So I'm hoping Justin Hall can turn it around. I don't know what I think. When it comes to the trade deadline this year, the Leafs are really gonna focus on the defense. Whether it's moving out a guy like Justin Hall, whether it's moving Dermott for another asset, bringing in, one thing I'm really interested in is Mark Giordano. He's on an expiring contract. He's a Toronto boy. He makes 6.75. There are more than one way to figure out how to fit that salary in there. And for sure, it's going to have to, probably there's tons of teams that have lots of cap space that you can work out a 3-team trade with, and which is becoming more common in the NHL because of the cap and the flat cap and everything like that. So I just, I see the Leafs defense on the left side, and I wouldn't mind moving Muzzin from the second pairing down to the third pairing. Um, Mark, it's one of those things where like he's played with Brody before and they've had success, and Morgan Riley does that now. And if Morgan Riley was, if you keep him on the top pairing and you move TJ Brody down one to the second pairing and put Giordano in that second pairing, and you open up a spot for Rasmus Sandin, Travis Dermott, Timothy Liljegren to play with Morgan Riley, then it really allows that third pairing of Muzzin and whoever to just play some solid low, not it won't be crazy ice time for Muzzin anymore, but I think he'll just be more concentrated on penalty killing and playing defense against certain players on the ice in terms of, producing the right matchups. I don't know. What do you guys think? Moving Muzzin down. Maybe Muzzin and Hall become the third pairing where they play a little bit less. And Brody and Giordano are the second pairing. And then you got Riley playing with, Sandine, Dermott, Liljegren. There's a lot of options there. It seems to me like an expiring contract like Giordano for sure will get traded this trade deadline. Um, Overall, I think, as you can see here, the Seattle Kraken have strategically picked up a lot of contracts that are expiring so that they can go into free agency and spend. And they're going to trade out a lot of these guys: Marcus Johansson, Calle Yarncroc, Jared McCann. Um, the Kraken are going to be busy come trade deadline time, that's for sure. It's just an idea. I had Mark Giordano just because he has that familiarity with Brody, and he can move Muzzin and Hall down to a third pair. A little bit less minutes, more focused on penalty killing and playing defense in certain matchups. I think it would really help the Leafs solidify their defense. Right now, there's with injuries and all that, there's a lot going in and out. So it's something I've been thinking about, and I think I'm eventually closer to the trade deadline. I'm going to put together an episode where I talk about different things like Mark Giordano, different players where the Leafs can add to their depth, and we'll see where we are with injuries and expiring contracts and such. But the best thing in Leafland right now is Michael Bunting and Zach Hyman have the same amount of points, and one is making 11 million over this season and next season, and Michael Bunting is a $950,000 player. This season and next season, he signed for 2 years. That is the steal of the season, alongside Mr. Jason Spezza, vintage Jason Spezza. Hey, Kyle Dubas, looking at you, bro. You're making some good decisions out there. I like the way you're doing things. Very smart general managering. I don't know if that's a word. I just made it up. General managering. You know what? You're good at this general managering. When the cap is flat and you got so much money invested in 4 guys, you're gonna have to get creative, and the Leafs are being creative. Leafs have adequately replaced Hyman, and Mrazek hasn't really played a lot of games, but they saved a bunch of money on Freddie Anderson, who's killing it in Carolina. Kudos to you, Freddie. Love you. Jack Campbell's doing a great job at a discount. So you got to find the bargains. That is for sure. Bargain Heralds. I don't know if you're old enough to remember Bargain Heralds, but Bargain Heralds may have closed down in Toronto, but if you walk over to the MLSC head offices, you're gonna find Kyle Dubas has his own Bargain Heralds. So that's our episode for today. Let me know what you guys think. What do you guys think about Mark Giordano? Maybe you have some trade ideas. Let me know. I'll make a little video, put all these ideas together, and we'll see where we come up with. We'll make our own team on Cap Friendly, and we'll see how it fits. You guys have a great weekend. I'll see you guys next week. I think it'll be my last episode before Christmas, and then I'll see you guys after the new year. So stay safe.